Hello, hi everybody. Welcome. Doug couldn't be here tonight. I'm Doug's good twin. He's the evil one. Just kidding. Just kidding. Anyway, so I was asked to announce that we do have extra power strips in a crate up here. So apparently there's been issues with people finding places to plug their laptops in. So if that applies to you, come up here and grab a power strip at some point. We've also been having intermittent Wi-Fi issues, but I feel like those have been getting better over the last couple of days. I actually have some tools in my toolbox that I can use to help solve some of those problems for you. So if you're still having Wi-Fi problems after we break up into groups, let me know. I can probably take care of that for you. Otherwise, I don't think I really have anything new to announce. We are going to hop into chapter 8 here pretty soon. Upcoming due dates, I think there's maybe one chapter due this weekend, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, just one chapter exercise due this weekend, so make sure you stay on top of those. Any questions about logistics or scheduling or upcoming stuff before we hop into today's review? Yeah, what's up?
My textbook gave me an error 504.
Your textbook gave you a 504 error. Is it?
That says it's not working.
Sounds like an internet problem, honestly, to me. Are you able to get to other websites okay?
I was able to access the browser too.
Oh,
I'm getting an error.
getting an error as well.
I'm not.
All right. I'm glad to hear that. It's possible that you may be having, there may still be some internet. I was just talking about the Wi-Fi. I don't want to just blame everything on the Wi-Fi, as tempting as it is to do that. But it's certainly possible that it could be a Wi-Fi issue.
Got it.
You got it? Did you?
Reload the page and do it.
So you just refresh. So I mean, that again kind of speaks to maybe being a Wi-Fi issue, possibly. For now, for the review session, you can just follow along with a neighbor if you need to, and then when we break up into small groups, if you're still having problems, let me know, and we'll get you squared away. Any other questions before we hop into review stuff? All right, cool. Let's hop into review stuff. Let's see. A week ago, you probably remember that I screwed up and sort of spoiled this chapter a little bit. So we're gonna do a little review of the review that I mistakenly reviewed last week, this week, because this is the time that I was supposed to do that. So I know we've already talked about this question, but a lot of you at that time were like, huh? So now hopefully there'll be a little bit less of that, and we can have a proper discussion. And I'll try and call on different people this time as well. What's the difference between a for loop and a while loop? Who can explain that for me? Yeah, in the back there. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, so you actually gave such a great answer that you not only answered this question, but you also kind of answered this second question as well, which is fantastic. A for loop is going to loop for some set amount of things, right? It could literally be, I want a loop that runs 7 times, or it could be something that's a little bit more vague than that. Maybe I don't know that the number is 7, but I know that the number is X, where I have access to some number X, right? But we know ahead of time roughly how many times a loop's going to run. That's how a for loop works. With a while loop, it's based more on a condition. I want to keep doing this until this thing happens or doesn't happen, or however you want to express it. So how many repetitions will that take? I don't know. Or maybe I do know, right? But I don't necessarily have to know how many repetitions it's going to take. I'll just keep doing this thing until eventually I hit my stopping point. right? So, that kind of answers when we should choose one over the other. Do I know how many things I want to do? Then that's a good time for a for loop. Do I not know how many times I want to repeat? Then that's a good situation for a while loop. Can I, use a while loop even if I know exactly how many times I want something to run? Is that all right? Sure, absolutely. I think one of the review questions in the textbook was a true or false question asking if I could take any for loop and rewrite it as a while loop. Is that true or false? It's true. That's true. And so you'll see people kind of come up with personal preferences where they'll, try to use a for loop until they find a good reason not to, and then they'll switch over to a while loop, or the opposite. They'll try to use a while loop until they find a good reason not to, and then they'll switch over to a for loop. It's kind of interesting to see, especially for novice programmers, what form you guys ultimately end up with. While loops do have another potential drawback, right? When does a while loop stop? A while loop stops when what? Yeah. When the condition is no longer true, right? We stop. Right. So what guarantees that that's going to happen? What guarantees that that while loop is going to meet that condition? The programmer, except sometimes we don't, right? We're supposed to. It's on us, in other words, right? It's on us to make sure that our loop is eventually going to hit a point where it stops. That is our responsibility as a programmer, but we're humans. We make mistakes, and sometimes we're going to write while loops that don't hit that condition, in which case it's just going to sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there forever and ever and ever. Infinite loops are definitely a thing. The textbook won't really let you get away with that because the textbook will just kill your program after, I forget how long, 10 seconds or 15 seconds or whatever the timeout is. But when you're out there in the real world and you're outside the confines of this textbook, if you make that mistake, it's not going to stop. It's just going to keep going. You have to figure out how to stop it at that point, which actually is not that hard. But it's something you should be aware of. If you're running your code and it feels like it's taking a very, very long time, check your loops. Check your while loops in particular. Is it possible to write a for loop that could run infinitely? Is that possible? What do we think? Is that a thing we can do? I'm not saying we should try to do it, but is it possible? Nobody's got super strong feelings, it seems.
No.
No? Yeah, it is. It is possible. It might be more difficult to get there, but it is definitely possible. In Python in particular, I think it's pretty difficult to write a for loop that will run forever. I think it's possible, but I think it's difficult just because of the way that Python does loops. In other languages, it's actually pretty easy to write a for loop that will run forever, even on accident. So yes, absolutely. You can write a for loop that will go forever. It doesn't happen as often though. Cool. So what does a break statement do? If I see a break statement in my code, what is that telling me? I'm gonna stop the loop dead in its tracks, right? I'm saying I'm done with this loop. It's over. How does that differ from a continue statement? What's the difference? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, the continue statement doesn't stop the entire loop. It stops, what's the computer science term for that? It stops just one round. What do we call that? An iteration. It stops the current iteration of the loop and goes on to the next one. So these are statements that we can use just to have more fine-grained control over our loops. However, I want to caution you, I'm not upset that we introduced these statements to you. I'm not upset that these statements are now in your toolbox. However, they should be used pretty sparingly. If you use a lot of breaks and continues in your loops, that's generally an indication that you are kind of being a little bit sloppy about what you're using those loops for. So it can be a sign of, awkward code, awkward programming. Not always, of course. There are legitimate uses for breaks and continues, But especially if you lean on them a lot, people are going to start raising their eyebrows at you. So just be careful about that as you're writing your loops. Cool. What's an escape character? Can somebody describe what an escape character is? Or if you'd rather skip that question and go to the second question first, I'd be happy to take an example of an escape character. Yeah, go ahead. Tab character. So what does that look like? It looks like I know what a tab looks like, right? A tab is, you have a key on your keyboard, it just moves it over a certain amount of space. What does it look like in our code? /T. What's another example of an escape character? The new line. What's the new line? /N. What other ones? There's more, I think. Although I'm kind of forgetting myself what the other ones might be. I feel like there were others that were introduced. Was there a space or something? I can't remember exactly. Tab and new line are probably the most common ones to use. So what's an escape character? I know I'm looking at an escape character when I see what? What's the giveaway there that I'm dealing with an escape character? Yeah. The slash. Yeah, the slash. And they can show up anywhere in any string, right? I don't have to use them by themselves. I can put them anywhere in any string that I want. They can show up at any point in any string. If I see that little slash, that's my indication that I'm using an escape character. There are other ones besides tab and new line, but those two are the ones you're going to see the most often. What's the point? Why do we bother? Why do we bother with escape characters?
Format your strings.
It helps format string output. Yeah, why don't I just put in new lines or tabs in my code to represent new lines and tabs in my text? Why don't I just do that? Why can't I do that? I'm sorry? They'll either be ignored or they'll be interpreted as, we use tabs, right? In Python to indicate when I'm inside of a loop or inside of a function. So those tabs might be interpreted improperly if I try to put them in there as I normally would. So, we can't represent those in our code. They'll either be ignored or they'll break stuff. So we use these escape characters just to kind of represent those things in our code when we need to use them. Cool. Any questions about loops, escape characters? Any questions about that stuff? You happy to take any questions? Alrighty, let's talk about images. If I give you a picture, if I give you a cat picture, right? What is that picture made out of? Pixels. And how are those pixels arranged? Rows and columns, rows and columns. So now we're going back to, algebra class when you had to learn about coordinate systems, right? So where's the beginning of the image? Where do I start? The origin, yeah, that's the mathematical term for it. What's the first row and the first column? Where is that on my screen? If I look at a picture and I want to say, this is where the picture starts, where is that? 0, 0? Where's that happen? What part of the image is that? Upper left, which is really friggin' annoying, right? Because in math class, the origin it's kind of in the middle, but lower left is what we're used to dealing with, and it goes upwards this way. On the computers, I don't know why, but we have to do it differently. We start in the upper left, and as the numbers go up, we go this way, down the screen. But that's how it works. The good thing about that is it's consistent. Every single computer does it that way. The 0, 0 is the upper left corner of the thing that you're working with. And as I go down my screen, the row number goes up. And as I go across to the right side of the screen, the column number goes up, right? So that's the structure of an image, rows and columns of pixels, where the origin of the image, the starting point, is going to be in the upper left corner. How do I define colors? What do I use to define colors? RGB values, so red, green, and blue. Typically, we assign a number between what and what? 0 and 255 to each of those colors, to each of those 3 colors, which you can imagine is a lot of different color combinations, right? A lot of different possible color combinations. And so, you know, with those combinations of red, green, and blue, we can come up with just about any color that we would like to have on our computer. That's really what a pixel is, right? A pixel is just a set of red, green, and blue values. So I give you a picture and I say, do something with this picture. I want you to, I don't know, rotate it or, you know, whatever the case may be. What am I going to start thinking about writing in my code to pull this off? What coding structures am I going to use to manipulate an image? What tools from my toolbox am I going to use? I'm sorry? Loops. Loops plural, right? That, can we be a little bit more specific? Nested, yeah, nested loops, nested for loops. In fact, we haven't seen a ton of nested for loops before now. We have seen some, but not a lot. It's such a common structure. It's such a useful structure. Anytime I'm dealing with what I would call two-dimensional data, right? Two-dimensional information. So anything that looks like a sheet of paper, right? Or a picture, something that's flat, right? Nested for loops are wonderful for dealing with that. When I'm writing loops, I like to think what the loops actually represent, what the loops are actually being used for. So I've got two loops. One loop's being used for what? Rows. The other loop's being used for columns. Does it matter which one? Can I use the first one for... I actually can do it either way. However, there's a pretty strong push towards using the first loop for rows and the second loop for columns. You might ask why, and part of the answer honestly is because that's how we've been doing it, right? I mean, that's just tradition, that's how we started doing it, and that's how we kept doing it. There's no real strong way answer other than that. But that is a pretty compelling answer, to be able to look at a piece of code and be familiar with it right away and not have to guess whether they are doing rows first or columns first. That being said, if you really have a need to go over the columns first instead of the rows, by all means, nobody's going to stop you. You can write loops that'll do that. It'll work perfectly fine. And so then in Python, we also have, well, actually, before we answer this question, which is a good question, what is an image in Python? We have a computer science term for that as well. Image is what is it? It's not a loop, it's not a variable, right? It's not an int, it's not a Boolean. What is it? It's an object. It's an object, good. It's an object. So I know that's not the first time we've talked about objects, and it definitely will not be the last time we're going to talk about objects. We've got a whole chapter about objects coming up here pretty shortly. But here's another great example of an object. So we treat an image as an object, meaning that it's got some information that it knows about itself, and we can also ask it questions. We can ask the image to tell us stuff about itself, right? What are some questions that we can ask? What are some methods that we can use on an image to get information out of it? What's some examples? I don't need a comprehensive list, just, yeah. The RGB values, so those come from pixels, right? So I can grab a pixel, right? What's a pixel in Python? What's a pixel in Python? Is that an int? Is that a Boolean? Is that a, what is that? Anybody know? It's also an object, yeah, it's also an object. It's also an object, right? So if I want to get red, green, and blue values, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to the picture, I'm going to go to the image and say, give me that pixel right there. And how do I tell it which pixel I want? What information do I have to give to it? The position, the coordinates, right? The row and the column. So give me that pixel, it'll give me the pixel, and then I have this pixel object now. So then I can go to the pixel and say, hey, what's your value for green? Give me that. I want to know what that is. And it'll tell me what that is. And then I can say, here, use this value for blue instead of whatever you had before. And it'll take that value that I gave to it, and that becomes its new blue value, right? We can manipulate both the image object and the pixel object that way. What are some other things that we can ask from our image? Yeah? Yeah, the dimensions, the length and the width, or the width and height, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can ask it how big it is. And what's it returning? Is it returning inches, centimeters, feet? Pixels, pixels, it's returning pixels. The nice thing about using pixels is, pixels can actually change size on different computers, right? A pixel on my laptop is probably a little bit different than a pixel on your laptop. It's probably different than a pixel on your other neighbor's laptop. But by treating everything as a pixel directly, I know that it'll show up the appropriate way on everybody's laptop. Whereas if I do things by feet and inches, I could get a little bit odd. If somebody's got a smaller monitor or a larger monitor, it could look strange, right? It could look off if I use the wrong size to measure width and height of a picture. Cool. Any others that you feel that are worth mentioning before we actually, this sort of reminded me to do something else real quick. I wanted to pull up something and talk to you about it. Any other methods, though, while I'm pulling this up that you'd like to discuss? Too far. So we gave you a whole bunch of them, right? And I don't expect you to, memorize all of them. That would not be a good use of your brain space. You're better off remembering things like birthdays and anniversaries than all of the different methods for manipulating images. So, but what I would like you to be aware of is on this page, which was part of the prep work today, eventually when we get down here, you see these tables that have, lists of methods available that we can use to manipulate various objects. This one's for pixel objects, and I believe there was a table for, did I skip the, image objects, right? Here's a list for image objects, right? In programming, we would call this an API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. Basically, I've got these objects that I want to use, but how do I interact with them? That's what the API tells me. How do I actually do stuff with those objects? That's the role of an API. It tells me what the interactions are that I can perform with a pixel object or an image object. And so as a programmer, right, you may be assigned a task. Here's a picture, go do something with it. And you may be like, well, all right, I kind of know what I want to do, but how do I get pixels out of this thing? How do I figure out information about this? You'd go find the API and you would look it up, right? Admitting that you don't know how to do that stuff is actually a good thing. That's the first part of solving the problem. Admitting that I don't know how to do this. So let me go figure it out. Let me go find the API. Let me go find the documentation here and use that as I'm writing this program. So I would honestly, I'm going to keep this tab open as we go through today's walkthrough. We're going to do an image manipulation example in our walkthrough today. And there very likely is going to get to be a point where, we have to do something and we're like, well, I don't know how to do that. And I'll refer back to this and we'll figure it out. We'll walk through it. We'll use the API to tell us the information that we need to accomplish the task at hand. Before I switch to the walkthrough, though, are there any questions about the concepts that we have reviewed so far? Yes?
It's kind of a curiosity question. I couldn't help but kind of laugh when my computer was taking 10 seconds or more to manipulate an image after running the code. And I was curious about programs like image manipulation programs, say Photoshop, how they are instantaneous in their changes. Do they do a different method than looping through every single pixel to achieve that kind of speed? Or
okay, so the question is, right, we run, these programs and you actually can sit there and count the number of seconds, right, that it takes to run some of these programs, whereas if you use Photoshop, you click a button and it just happens. And so the question that was just asked, in case you didn't hear it, was how does Photoshop pull it off when this takes forever? There are many reasons for that. Some reasons could be what you suggested, which is, maybe writing 2 for loops to iterate over every single pixel is not the best way to solve the problem. That's one possible answer, but the other possible answer has to do with the platforms that these things are running on. When we run our programs here, part of what's happening is it's taking your code, it's shipping it off over the internet to wherever this textbook lives. I don't even know where this textbook lives, right? On a server somewhere. It could be 3 states away for all I know. And then it's running the code on the server, getting the results, and then shipping it back, right? When you're doing Photoshop, it doesn't have to do that. It's just all happening right there on your computer. So there's another huge chunk of time that you're spending just sending stuff back and forth that Photoshop doesn't have to do. It's probably realistically some combination of both. When you pay for Photoshop, which is not cheap, right? Photoshop is very expensive. When you pay for Photoshop, what are you buying? You're buying many, many years of programmers sitting around saying, I don't just want to make this image do this thing. I want to do it as fast as I possibly can. And so they're going to sit there and tweak every little piece of it until it works perfectly and efficiently. That's why it costs, I don't know, $600 or whatever it is, ridiculous to get Photoshop. That's what you're paying for. So, interestingly enough, I mean, after this unit, you could mimic some Photoshop features. There are others that would be harder to pull off, but there are some things you could certainly do. Or maybe Photoshop's a little bit too high of a bar. Let's aim for Microsoft Paint, right? We could get there, right? I feel like we could do most of the stuff that's in there based on this chapter. Yeah, great question. Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, let's hop into the walkthrough then. I'm going to leave this page open, like I said, because I expect that we're going to need to refer back to some of this information as we go through the walkthrough today. But I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the walkthrough. And as I typically do, you shouldn't be surprised, I got rid of almost all the code that was there because I want to come up with our own solution. I don't just want to use the code that was given to us. However, I did save a copy of the output. So what we're doing is we have an image. In this case, I just happen to choose this one, or this, the studio happens to choose this one, and we want to apply a red filter to it. So before we write code, let's just take a moment to talk about that. When I say apply a red filter to an image, what am I really doing? Does anybody know how the filter process works? Yeah.
You're taking out the green and blue values.
Yeah, I'm removing the green and blue entirely from everything, right? I'm keeping the red, removing the green and the blue from the image. This is used, for various reasons. Not the way they do it now, but the way they used to do 3D movies back in the 80s is based on red and blue filters. You remember those old school 3D glasses with one blue lens and one red lens? That's a red filter and a blue filter that when they were merged together filtered out one side of the 3D image so that you could see the stereoscopic thing. That's not how they do it anymore, but that's what it's been used for. It's been used for sending secret messages and stuff like that. And so, yeah. So that's what we want to do. We want to visit every single picture in this image, and we want to turn it red. Now, before we start writing code, right, let's think about this. Well, actually, let's do what we usually do. I'm going to try and be consistent here and comment out some things, the steps that we want to do in English first, and then we'll come back and fill in the code. So I've already loaded up the image, right? I've just gone ahead and loaded it up. What are some other things that I need to do? I'm not even worried about the order necessarily that I need to do them in. Just what are some of the things that you think we're going to need to do to pull this off? Anybody have any suggestions for me? Yeah. We're going to need some loops. How many loops are we going to need? At least 2. We're going to use that nested loop structure, right? So in comments, what I might say is for each row and then for each column, right? So these 2 loops will get me to every single pixel on the image, right? Every single one. Okay. What else do I need to do? Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Take out the green and blue. So that's a very general statement, but that's good enough for now. Take out the green and blue of each pixel. Right? That'll happen inside of our loop, since I know my loop's going to hit each pixel. I think this is actually a lot more complicated than it sounds right now. Right? But we'll deal with that when we get there. There's some general, formatting stuff that we need to do, right? How do I show a picture to you? How do I actually say, here's the picture that I want you to look at? What do I have to do?
Image.draw.
We have to draw the image. What do I need before I can do that? We need a screen. We need a window, right? So, I can create a window, draw the image, right? I'll manipulate it first and then create the window and then draw the image. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else that you feel like we need to do? Anything else that you feel like might be missing? I'm sorry? I can't quite hear you. Width and height. So what do we need width and height? Can we be more specific than that? I think the width and height are valuable. What do we need to do with those particular values? Yeah, we will need to find out how big the picture is. What are we going to use that information for, though? Where's that going to fit in? The loops, they'll be part of the loops, right? So there's sort of an implied width and height there, right? But in English, this is what I want to do. I know that it's based on the width and height, right? So we'll figure that out when we draw the code. I have a question for you, right? When I work on Photoshop or Paint or whatever the case may be, and I do something, it doesn't have to be a filter, it could be anything, right? When I perform this operation, is it changing the actual picture? No, it's not changing the actual picture, right? I can open up Paint, I can draw a whole bunch of stuff over the picture, and I can see it there on my screen, but then if I close the program without saving it, my original picture is intact, right? I'm not manipulating the actual picture, right? So what does that mean? I'm manipulating a copy. I'm manipulating a copy, or I'm making a copy of that picture, right? So we need to, I think that's actually good practice for us, not just from a learning how to work with pictures standpoint, but also just from a general image processing standpoint. I don't want to change the actual picture, the original source image, because if I screw up, I don't really have any way of undoing that particular operation. I want to make a copy that has this applied to it. So there needs to be some sense of making a copy, or yeah. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a direct copy, right? We could start with a blank picture and then construct this filtered picture based off of that. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? You could approach it from either way. Like most computer science problems, there are multiple paths you could take to solve this particular problem. Any other pieces that I'm forgetting? There might be. Yeah.
Well, I have a question. Why do we have to make a copy? Will it save it as?
So if I, in code, there's no undo button, right? I run a program and that's it. It happened. It's done.
So the original file, like original blueprint.
It would be manipulated, yeah. Now, the textbook's probably doing some stuff to make sure that we don't blow up all their pictures, right? I'm sure that the textbook's protecting us from doing too much damage, but in the real world, there's nothing stopping you from doing that kind of damage. So you, as a programmer, need to be aware of that situation. You can't Control-Z a program. You run the program, there's no Control-Z, it's done. The program ran, it did whatever you told it to do, it's done, right? You can't go back. So you need to take steps to protect yourself. Make a copy of the image, and that way if whatever I'm trying to do doesn't work out quite right, I just throw the copy away and I still got the original and I can try again. That's sort of the idea here. It's very important. All right, there might be stuff that we forgot, but I think we got enough to at least get started, right? We got enough to at least get started. And since we're on this topic of making a copy of our image, let's see if we can start to piece some of that stuff together first. When I say make a copy, that might be a little bit misleading. Maybe I can just make an empty image instead. It's a blank slate for us to work on. And then whenever we figure out what we want, you know, the pixels to be, we can just put them in there. Does that make sense? So how do I do this? I'll be honest with you, I have no idea. I have no idea. I've already hit a point where it's like, I know I can do this. I know this is a thing that's possible. It seems entirely reasonable that I can do this thing, but I don't know how to do this. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my API and see if there's anything over here that can help me out with this. In fact, I'm almost certain that there is. So if I look at image objects down here, right? Excuse me. Oh, hey, look. This looks like it might help us out. Empty image. Empty image. So this is going to create a blank image for us. All white pixels. What are these numbers here? What does that represent? The height and width. Which one's first? Do we know? Is it the width or the height? Is it the width first? Okay, I'll trust you. Actually, I would expect to see that information here. But anyway. So look, it even gives us a code example, which is perfect. And most APIs actually will do this. They'll give you little code examples, and I honestly like to take the code examples and use them and then manipulate them to fit the situation that I want. So this is going to create a new image that is 100 pixels wide and 200 pixels tall. Is that what I want? I mean, I guess it could be. There's like a very, very small chance that that happens to be the size of the picture that I'm working with, right? But I can do better than that. I can do better. How can I make sure that this is going to be the width and the height of the image that I'm going to be manipulating? Yeah. Yeah, I have to grab the height and the width from the image that I started with. And actually, you can see that right down here, right? Get width and get height are part of the methods that we can use to interact with images. So let's use those. Well, you can see I've got a little bit of a problem here. I already had a variable called image, so calling this image is not, that's not good. So let's switch that, call it new image. And then over here, I just want to ask for the width, right, of the image that I started with. And so the API says that I can say image dot get width. Oops. Like that. And then this would be the height. So I'll say image dot get height. Okay? So far so good? Anybody lost? Anybody confused about what we did? Yes.
Don't you need to put the picture you're getting the width and the height from image?
I'm sorry?
Don't you need to put the picture you're getting the width and the height from image?
The picture that I'm getting the, so how do I know which picture I'm getting the width and the height from? Where does that come from? It's a good question. I know you figured it out after you asked it, but it's still a good question. It's still worth talking about. How do I know where that's coming from? This guy, that's an object. So the thing before the dot is the object that I'm asking a question, right? I'm asking a question of an object. This is the object that I'm directing my question at. And the question that I'm asking is, how wide are you? Right? How many pixels wide are you? And it will happily tell me the answer. I know we haven't done much of anything yet. I really know that we have not done much of anything yet. But I feel as though I've been really bad about testing my work in previous examples with you. So even though we've written a grand total of 1 line of code, I would like to try and get this to a point where we can at least verify that this does what we think it's going to do. So in order to do that, what do I need? How can I verify that this line of code is going to create a blank image for me? What do I need to test that out? I need to create a window and draw that image, right? And so, honestly, again, do I know how to do that? Kind of. I mean, I've done it before. I know that it's possible. I know that it's a thing that can be done. But I think it's, you know, useful to find an example of what that might look like, of which I thought there was one over here. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place. Thought there was, okay, here we go. Here we see a window, image.imageWin, right? So what's this line of code doing for us in English? It's creating a new window for us, and we're telling it how big we want this window to be, right? It's creating a new window for us, and we're telling it how big we want this window to be. So I'll stick that down here. Is this okay? Do I need to change anything about this part? Is this all right? Is that okay? Are these values going to work for me? Yeah.
I'm curious, how come we didn't put the window up top?
How come we didn't put it up top? Does it matter? Do I need to see anything up here? I mean, so the reason I put it, I'll explain my thought process, and you do not have to agree with me. You're totally welcome to disagree with me at any point. The reason I put it at the bottom is because when I first set this problem up, the idea was create a blank image, manipulate the existing image, and then show it, right? So what are we doing right now? We're doing the show it. And this is the manipulating, and this is the blank image, right? So I'm just kind of spelling things out in the way that I put them together up here in my head. Now, does it have to happen in exactly this order? No. In fact, you can actually see over here that they did it in a different order. They did it up top. Right? That's okay. They're also doing something different from what we're doing. They're not doing the same thing that we are. They're doing something else, right? So which way is better? I don't know that better is a word that we can use to describe either path. I just sort of followed my gut instinct on that one. And that's why it led me there. If you don't like it, it's your program. Have fun with it. Do it the way you want to. But then this line here, we can also see, I think it's hopefully fairly obvious what this line is doing. It's saying, I want to draw this image on this window that I created. So I'm going to steal this one as well, right? Now, is this line okay as is? Can I just copy paste it like that and be happy with it? Well, let's try it. Whoops. That doesn't look like a blank picture to me. That doesn't look like a blank picture. That looks like the picture we started with. I thought I was trying to draw this blank picture that I made. New image. I have to specify that I want to use my new image down here. Now, it should be the same size, right? The size should be the same, but I just want to get a blank slate, like a blank canvas, right? We're about to do a little Bob Ross action up here, right? So hopefully, all right, cool. It looks about the same size. I'm not going to sit there and count the pixels.
It's the same size because you're doing the original image as well.
Yeah, so we actually never answered this question. Is this okay that we're doing this? Is this okay that we're doing this?
Yeah.
I mean, I like that answer. The answer is, yeah, it works out, but it's kind of sloppy, right? That is the correct answer. That is what I consider to be the most correct answer. It works out. It's not going to break anything, but it's kind of sloppy. Why am I saying that it's sloppy? What's sloppy about it? I'm sizing the window based off the original image, not the image that I'm actually putting in the window. I know that they're going to be the same size, and that's why we can get away with it. But it's kind of sloppy, right? It sort of implies that I intend to display this original image in this window when that's actually not what I'm doing. So, you know, would you have to change this? No, not necessarily, but I will sleep better tonight changing it. This makes me feel better, so I'm going to do it. And I would encourage you to details are important, especially with programming. Details are important. So I would encourage you to try and be consistent as well. And honestly, right, should this, if I click run again, should that change anything that we've done? No, there's the same old white box that we were looking at 30 seconds ago. Didn't have any effect, but it's a cleaner outcome.
I think there was an error below.
Do I have an error? Oh, I do. Did I type something wrong? Cannot read property width of undefined on line 15. What did I do wrong? Okay. Thank you for pointing this out. I think I wasn't expecting this, but this is great. It says it cannot figure out width of undefined. So what is it mad about? Does anybody know? There's a couple things actually that I could point at as being sort of weird about this.
Do we need to draw the
So for starters, I did change these, right? But I didn't change this. So that could be the problem. Or, no, I'm sorry, that's not it. I'm sorry. That's not right. I made a mistake. That's not it. That's not the problem. Have we inserted any pixels into this empty image yet? We have not. We have not put any pixels in that image just yet. So, you know, it could be upset about that. Even though we told it how big we expect it to be, it could be upset about the fact that we haven't actually set any values, although I don't see why it would be upset about that, to be perfectly honest.
It's supposed to be filled with all white pixels.
Yeah, exactly. You are exactly right. The API does in fact say that this picture should be, where the heck is it? Man. Okay, here it is. It does in fact say that it should have all white pixels. Although white is in quotes, that's a little weird. I really hate it when people use quotes unnecessarily. It's a pet peeve of mine. But, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the quotes imply, right? What is it? When I see quotes around a word like that, it's like, well, that could be anything now, right? What do you mean by that? That's interesting. That is a little interesting. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. To fix, undefined, cool. Cool. All right. It says it can't read width of undefined, so that's, I mean, it seems like it's telling me that this image isn't defined somehow, which just seems odd to me. It just seems a little odd to me because we clearly define it up here, unless I made a mistake up here that I'm not seeing. I'll tell you what, I'm going to forge ahead. Unless anybody's got a brilliant idea that you would like me to try, I'm happy to experiment.
The only thing I can think of that I noticed is it does look like on those previous exercises they draw it twice. Like there's a dot draw at the top of their code and then down at the bottom.
You're absolutely right. They do draw it twice, but I think they have a reason for that. And the reason for that is that they are showing you the original picture and then animating the change over top. That's why they're drawing it multiple times, right? We're not doing that, or at least I wasn't intending to do that. I was just intending to just draw it once. So something's definitely off here. I agree that something's definitely off. I don't see what it is. I don't see what it is. However, I feel like there's a reasonable chance that once we fix this stuff, that our other problem might be fixed. So my suggestion would be, let's move on to this section and see if that fixes our problem. And if it does, that'll help us explain what happened. And if it doesn't, then we'll have to try harder, I guess, and figure it out. So let's see if we can tackle this part next. For each row and for each column, that's what I see next on my list. So let's go ahead and get these loops set up. How do I write a loop that's going to go over each row? For what? For what? I is a good choice. And then what? Good old range. What's going to be in my range? It's going to be in my range. So do I want to go rows or columns? That's the question, right? We said rows, so that means I need to go from the top to the bottom. That's describing the height. So new image dot get height. Are we good? I used the new one, but should we use the new one or the old one? That's a good question. What are we doing? We're actually gonna grab a pixel out of the old one. So maybe the old one is better here, right? Maybe the old one is better. Let's use the old one since I actually need to get those pixels out. Those are the pixels that I'm actually retrieving from the old image. Let's use the old image here. Great question. And then I need to do for each column, which is going to be very similar, right? What should I use in place of I? What's the programmer convention? J. So we just keep going up the alphabet. And actually, if you wanted to do a third loop in here, which is not entirely unusual, you would go ahead and use K. That's totally acceptable. You don't see L very often, though. If you're going 3 loops deep, that's a pretty good place to stop, right? Any more than that, and you should start kind of wondering, like, really? Should I have one more piece of cake? No. No, I should stop at 3. 3's good. So we'll get the width this time, since that's going to be used for the columns. And now we have this very general statement. It says, take the green and blue out of each pixel. But it's actually a little bit more complicated than that, right? Can we describe this process in a little bit more detail? When I say take the green and blue out of each pixel, what's the very first thing that I have? I can't do this all in one, well, I mean, maybe you could do it all in one step, but I'd like to break this down into smaller steps. What's a small step? Yeah. Get the pixel. So we're going to get the pixel, right? What's the next thing I'm going to do? I'm going to mess with the color somehow, right? Now remember, just like I was talking about before, I don't want to change the original image. What about the original pixels? Can I change the original pixels? I mean, I can. I guess a better question is, should I change the original pixels? And the answer is no, actually, I shouldn't. I shouldn't change the original pixels. That'll modify the original image. So get the pixel I'm interested in, get the information out of that pixel, and use it to create a brand new one, a brand new pixel. And then what? What's the last step? Put the pixel into the final image, the image that we're working on. Let me spell this out in a little bit more detail. Get pixel from old image, pull out information, create new pixel, put new pixel in new image. This is, I think, a more accurate representation. What we said before wasn't wrong, it was just leaving out some of the details. This is, I think, a more accurate representation of what we should do here. So, all right, step 1, get the pixel from the old image. How do I do that? I mean, we can use our API again if we want to. That's totally fine. The API has methods for accessing pixels. I think I saw it earlier. Get pixel. Oh, wait a second. This is telling us column and then row. Isn't that a little backwards? Ooh, that's kind of annoying. But we need to pay attention to this, right? If this wants the column first and then the row, then what does that mean for me? Image.getPixel. What am I going to tell it here? J first, then I. I got to be honest with you, this is a little bit annoying to me, but it's the right thing to do, so my feelings about it are irrelevant. This will get the pixel at column J, row I. Again, consider that I is going to go for every row, J is going to go for every column. So we're just keeping that consistency, right? Okay. What am I going to do? Am I done with this line? What am I going to do with this? Put it in a variable, right? Put it in a variable. Pixel equals that. Okay? Next step says pull out information. When I say pull out information, what information am I really trying to pull out? the color, more specifically the red stuff, right? I want to get the red information out. So red equals. And then here we can use the pixel API. We haven't taken a look at that to help us out yet. But the pixel has a method called getRed that'll tell us the red component. So pixel.getRed. I'm sorry, did somebody ask a question or am I hearing things? Okay. So now I have the red information. What am I going to use for the values of green and blue? 0. I'm just removing them, right? I'm taking them out. So now it says create a new pixel. Let's go back to our API and see, okay, cool. Create a new pixel. The red value comes first, the green value comes second, and the blue value comes third. So we're going to create a new pixel, right? Like this. And I need to give it 3 values. The first value is going to be the red value that I pulled out. The second value is the green value. We said that's going to be 0. The third value is the blue value. That's also going to be 0, right? Am I good? I used pixel twice. This time it's capitalized. What's the difference there? Does anybody know? Is this okay? Did I screw up? You could argue that it's a little confusing, and I would actually agree with you that it's a little confusing, but I don't think it's technically wrong. When I see this capital letter, does anybody know what that refers to? A little ahead of where we're at right now, but not too far ahead. It means I'm creating an object. When I see a capital letter like that as the name of my function, the very first letter, if it's capitalized, it usually means I'm creating a brand new object, which is in fact exactly what we're doing here, right? Creating a new pixel object. It's usually what that means. Now, you could argue that having this and this variable is confusing, and I actually would tend to agree with you. So if you want to change this variable name to something that's a little bit, more easily distinguished from that, I certainly would not blame you. All right, am I good on this line? Probably create a variable, new pixel. We're almost there. Last thing it says, put the new pixel into the new image. And so just like we had this getPixel method, I'm assuming that there's some method that's going to be used for, here we go, setPixel. I tell it the position, and then I give it the actual pixel that I want to set, right? So is the position going to be any different than what I used for getPixel? No, it's going to go in the exact same spot, right? So I have setPixel ji, and then the third thing that I need is the actual pixel that I want to set. So that's going to be new pix. Am I good? No. What did I do? I made a mistake. What did I forget? Yeah. I need to tell it what image I'm setting the pixel on, right? Right now it doesn't know what image I want this pixel to go into. But we know what image we want this to go into. We want this to go into the new image. The new image, good. So we'll put that out front. All right. Is this going to work? I honestly don't know, but I feel like we're at a spot where we can at least try it out and see what happens and hope that it does. I feel like there's a reasonable chance that we'll still have that same error that we had before. I feel like there's also a pretty reasonable chance that we won't have that error. We might have a different error, or it might actually work. I honestly don't know, but let's run it and see what happens. Okay. Pixel is not defined on line 18. So it's telling me it doesn't know what this is. Does anybody know why that might happen? Does anybody know why? Look, wait a second, you don't know what a pixel is? Come on, computer. Does anybody know why that might happen? Does it think it's a variable? Well, I removed the pixel variable, right? I'm sorry? Image.pixel. So let's take a look at Does the API say that and I just skipped it? Or what did I do wrong here? It's possible that I just missed it. I think you might be right though. Image.pixel. There's actually another way that we could have possibly solved this problem. You actually see that I've used image dot in front of a lot of things. If I got tired of doing that, does anybody know what I could have done? Maybe we haven't talked about this quite yet. I import image up here, but I could also, I think, include a using statement for image that would prevent me from having to type it out all over the place. But I'm not going to do that. We're already, pretty far into it, so I don't want to make such a drastic change this late in the process. Let's see if that fixes our error and/or, hey, this is actually a good sign, the fact that it froze, because it is going to take a little while. Did it work? Or did it, oops, I scrolled down too far. Sorry. It didn't work. Cannot read property width of undefined on line 23. So it's still, this is the same line. So we didn't fix our problem. We didn't fix our problem. So what the heck did I do wrong? Clearly, something's not quite right, and I'm struggling to see where I made a mistake. I made a mistake somewhere. That I am certain. Does anybody see what I did wrong? When it tells me it's undefined, right? It's really leading me to believe that this is undefined somehow. And I just don't see, let's go back. So I'm a little stumped. I'm not ashamed to admit it. Let's see if I can figure out, what the heck's going on with this image that I got. Let me see if I can check the API and see if there's some, information. I don't see anything here that's going to help us out. Right? I don't see anything here that's going to help us out. Let's see if there's anything in this example that might help us out, or some of these other examples that might help us out. Figure out what this problem is. What did I do? Does anybody see it?
It's just the new image. They want it to be image and not new image.
Well, I believe that you could change this to say image, right? But that's not satisfying to me because I really feel like this should work. Yeah.
I put both of them into variables and put the variables in the rows.
I'm sorry. Did what now? Put both. So you stuck these in variables and then.
Right, but I did it for the old image and then I used those two variables to generate the empty image.
So going back to your suggestion real quick, and I understand your suggestion as well, I believe that this would work. Like, I'm not going to argue against that at all. It just feels odd to me that what we had before doesn't work. That's what's bothering me. I believe that this will work. I believe that what you suggest also will work. And if all you're trying to do is solve this problem and move on with your day, then okay, cool, you did it. But this is bothering me, right? I don't understand why this wouldn't work. We created this image. We took all this time to create this image, and you're telling me that I can't ask it how tall it is? I can't ask it how wide it is? That seems a little bizarre to me. It seems a little baffling to me. So I'm trying to figure out what there might be, that would cause that situation to happen. I'm trying to see if there's something from these past examples that could possibly help us here. And I'm not sure that I'm seeing anything that would accomplish it. This might have to be to be continued.
So should we look at maybe Google or Stack Overflow?
Yeah, Google or Stack Overflow would be.
Actually does.
Yeah, Google or Stack Overflow would be fantastic ideas. Let's see, empty image, Python example. Just try the first one, why not? This may not be the correct empty image one, though. No, I don't like this one. The problem that we're going to have now is that there are multiple image libraries out there, and we need to find the one that we're specifically using for us, which may actually be quite difficult, unfortunately. It may be a library that was developed specifically for this textbook, for all I know. In fact, I actually think that's true. It's a library developed specifically for this textbook. What we could do, and this is a little bit cheating, but I could load up the official solution that was here before. That kind of makes me sad. But I'll get over it. I'll get over it. Look, they create the empty image. They create the image window. They use the old image. Interesting. Interesting. Well, that doesn't satisfy me at all. I am unsatisfied by that. But perhaps that's just going to have to be the moral of today's story, because I don't want to spend half an hour trying to figure out what went wrong. We can use our time better. Let's go ahead and bite the bullet and switch it over to, say, the old image instead of the new one, and it does in fact work. We did get there. I'm a little unsatisfied, but we got there. We got there. I can honestly say that while you guys are broken up in the studio, I may investigate this issue a little further, perhaps. And honestly, it could be that I'm just thinking about this in the wrong way. That could absolutely be a thing. I don't want to rule out human error in this process. In fact, not 99% of the time, a lot of the time, it really is our fault, not the computer's fault, right? What other questions do you have about this example? Sorry for the weirdness with the. We did get there, and I thought you guys did a really great job of breaking this part down. I thought that was excellent. So what other questions do you have? What other things can I help you with before we break up into our groups? You're going to do more image manipulation today. You're going to make a blurry image as part of Studio. And there's some additional bonus missions down here as well, I'm fairly certain. Yeah, so if you get through the blurry one and you want to work on some extra stuff, there's a couple of extra things down here. Plus you have an assignment that's due on Sunday, so you can always spend your time working on that as well. But try and make some blurry images first, and I will call you back here around 8 o'clock like I usually do to go through the Studio. Thanks, everybody.